The community talks were recorded at FarCon NYC on May 2nd, 2025. Speakers were voted on by the FarCon attendees. FarCon is Farcaster's annual event organized by the community for innovators, builders, and network contributors. Interviews with the speakers and GM Farcaster followed the main stage talks. Thank you to all the sponsors who made this conversation possible, including media partner GM Farcaster, media sponsor Nounstow, and the FarCon team of volunteers. Learn more at farcon.nyc.
Today I'm going to talk about DYOR, philosophy more popularized by Vitalik that really means differential, defensive, democratic, and decentralized acceleration. And this is actually more of kind of a personal spin of mine through some of my own beliefs and experiences. Quick about me, my name is Tayyab. I'm a startup generalist. I've worked across startups in a bunch of different niches and a bunch of different roles. I've been a founder, I was a YC alum, and I'm FID 66, so I've kind of seen all of Farcaster, really. I'm currently a full stack engineer at Icebreaker, where we're building the professional network layer on top of Farcaster and the badges that most of you guys have around your necks. And what this actually is this is a call to arms. The world is headed in a ton of different directions that we all may not want to see, and there are steps that we need to take so that we get to the world that we all want to see. Right? About 2/3 of the world lives under some form of censorship. That's actually over 5 billion people in the world. Internet freedom has been in decline for 14 straight years. We all live in some sort of surveillance mechanism, and this is not simply true in just China. This is actually true in the West. The government can get information about you if they so want. Geopolitically, we now live in a fluid global order. The word of the year for 2025 is likely to be uncertainty. We, in the developed world, young and old alike, face some sort of loneliness, mental health, anxiety epidemic. And the climate continues to rage on in a catastrophe. But look, I'm a definite optimist. I believe that version N+1 solves the problems of civilization N. And I'm a believer that this happens not through regulation or degrowth. It happens through building and acceleration, right? We need to get to a place of abundance in the world. And the only way we can do that is by solving problems. We've been building for a very long time as people. We're healthier, more connected, more advanced. Healthcare is better. Child mortality, poverty is down. We have access to information. We have access to intelligence that we've never had before. But acceleration is good, right? Let's talk about an example from Pakistan. So in 1947, Pakistan and the Indian subcontinent was liberated from the British Empire, and a large minority religious group wanted to separate and have their own nation called Pakistan. Around 15 million people moved from India to Pakistan and Pakistan to India. 2 million people died in the chaos that ensued. There was hostility between the two countries. There were land disputes over Kashmir, where most of the water comes from. And Pakistan realized that it had to have a powerful military to defend itself. And it did so by taking 40% of its annual revenue and putting it directly into the military. So much so that we have a famous quote that goes, "We will eat grass, even go hungry, but we will get our own nuclear bomb. We have no other choice." And Pakistan got the nuclear bomb. It is the only country, Muslim country in the world to have a nuclear weapon. So it got security, but it didn't get prosperity. 40% of Pakistan still lives in poverty today. And so what I'm trying to say is that the direction of acceleration matters. It's not good enough to simply hit the gas pedal. It's also important to guide the steering wheel of civilization's advancements. Let's take a look at another example. Probably one that we all care about, right? centralized AI. Most of us access AI today through ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Amazon, and whatnot. The most powerful AIs are likely going to be built by the entities with the most amount of resources, which are going to be nation states. These nation states are going to make God models that basically follow their principles, their values, their strategic goals. And these are not simply chatbots, right? These are policy advisors. These are military strategists. These are the educators, right? You get a different answer based on the values of the country that runs the compute, right? Whoever owns the compute owns the intelligence. And what we need is what we all think about, which is secure technologies. And many of us probably think about decentralized AI. We think about decentralized censorship-resistant compute. We think about local open source models that we can run and be able to have censorship-free intelligence, which is going to become more and more important in the world. So for me, I think about these principles of decentralized or defensive technologies that sort of I've come up with, right? Defense favoring. Technology should, as a default setting, protect you from the harm that can come from everyday life. The classic example is obviously encryption, but it's also that stupid freaking medicine cap that you have to open, right? That protects child's lives basically everywhere. Resilient infrastructure, resilient and anti-fragile technologies. My favorite example of this is open source. When we have open source software, we're able to review, test, and improve software as sort of a bottoms-up community where you have more eyes than simply the employees that work at whatever company. Dispersion of authority, right? Classic example is a blockchain. Concentrated power corrupts or falls in the wrong hands, and then they get gain at somebody else's downside. And so being able to disperse the ability to make decisions is a really important thing that we will need. And this is the one that I think is actually probably the most important. We globally face a crisis of trust. If there's one thing that we can figure out how to try to solve, it's how do we scale trust at an internet level to unlock human cooperation. This is the core thing that we're trying to solve at Icebreaker. And I believe every one of us would like to live in a high-trust society. So what can you do? I would say, build and use DAC products. I think building is obvious, but using DAC products basically signals to the market that you want products that have specific values and that you're willing to pay for those. Just a quick example of some technologies that some of us use or could use. I'm not going to go through too much of this. But that's all for me. Thank you so much, and accelerate consciously.
You guys can hear me anyways. Okay. Next is somebody who actually, I reference his mini app maybe the most when I onboard new people. And I'm like, do you remember early Facebook? There was this app called Farmville. We have the equivalent. It's just without the M. It's Farville. And people love that. So without further ado, please welcome Limone to talk how to make mini apps go viral.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Cool. Let's see if yes, it works. So I'm Limone from Rome, Italy. Today I'm going to talk about how to make mini apps viral based on my and our experience with Farville and a bunch of mini apps that we built. Before jumping in, quick intro about myself. Again, I came from Rome. I'm a software engineer, but also community builder. So on one side, maybe on Farcaster, you know me for shipping products, hacking stuff all the time, and that's true, of course, and we do that with Builder's Garden, our product studio. On the other side, I love community. I love building communities, and I'm building a community in Rome called urbe.it. We're running it Rome, hosting a physical hub, the first actually physical Web3 hub in our country, and we're trying to create an ecosystem from scratch. But yeah, so a couple weeks ago, I wrote this article about all my learnings and kind of like trying to lay down some items that I think are important to make sure that your mini app goes viral. So after the presentation, you can also check it out on Paragraph. It's even more detailed, maybe. So first thing, there's a bunch of like mini apps ecosystem. There's like Telegram, WorkCoin, and there's Farcaster, of course. And the most interesting thing for me about Farcaster, and when I think about building a mini app on Farcaster, is that we are inside a social network. So every time even like yesterday, when sitting down at the Builder Day to come up with a new idea to build, we were trying to think it in a way that it's multiplayer first. I want like people to share it on the feed. I want people to play with their friends or use that shared experience with their connection on Farcaster. And it's extremely like simple to use like tools like Ninar or Embed or anything like that you can use to pull up profile information or anything related to the Farcaster social graph in general. And these are some examples. So you can see like on Farville, for example, we have a simple like leaderboard that is showing you, like your ranking based on experience points, and we're also showing like special leaderboards within your friends so that you can compete. And in the middle, we have like Ponder, which I think is like, I got a ton of inspiration from Ponder on how they were showing like these profile pictures below every of their predictions, because it's interesting how that maybe can make you more engaging with that prediction. And of course, like you're on Farcaster, you can easily invite your friends in. It's easy like to track referrals as well. Creating shareable moments, I think it's probably like the most important thing. Dan this morning was talking about, somebody asked the question about discovery and searching mini apps. Most of it like today happens in the feed, and so it's important that you plan your mini app to be something that people are willing to share in the feed. You have some actions in the SDK today that you can use to do that, and it's important also to come up with some custom preview images that are fun. In this case, I picked like this example of Moshikam Haura mini app that went viral during it Denver, if I'm not wrong, where after minting your NFT here, like your profile, your new like Haura picture, it will prompt you to share it on Farcaster. Design for feed virality, so making the preview image as engaging as possible, including social proof is a trick that we've been using with Farville as well. So when scrolling in the feed, first of all, I want to see like a clear image or even like call to action of what I'm supposed to do, what the user is sharing, but also I think it's useful to share how many people, for example, are using that mini app, how many people are engaging in that prediction, or how many people, in the case of Farville, are active and playing the game. Because if it's just me or 10 people, maybe it's not fun enough, Rewarding people, you can do that like through collectibles, badges, social status, so like even just daily streaks or like leaderboard position is something that users are willing to share, at least in my experience in what we've been building. And of course, like we've been experimenting with it within Farville. In the case of Fargate, for example, you have a daily streak that kind of build on top your dopamine effect. And in the case of Warp Slot, they were trying to reward you to come back every day with 5 free spins. So it's a way to reward users, and if they feel rewarded, then I'm sure they will be more likely coming back. Notifications are also another like superpower that Farcaster gives us today. So I think it's a very powerful tool that we can use to, first of all, send announcements. For example, today I received a new announcement for the acid test episode 2 that it was live for minting, and that brought me back in the app. So notifications are definitely another way in which you can bring people back in. And you can do that with broadcast notifications. So whenever you have something important to announce, a new feature or a new event happening, you can do that also asynchronously somehow. So taking Farville as an example, whenever you plan something, we are notifying you, let's say like few hours later, whenever that crop is ready to harvest. And I've been seeing a bunch of like mini apps using some like triggered or special event notification according to any actions that you performed in the past. And then, of course, like notify me when some of my friends maybe are interacting with the app, because it's more likely that I'm interested into it. And yeah, like this goes from Ponder, for example. Anytime there's a big prediction going on, they notify you, and then maybe you're willing to go there because it's an interesting one, and you end up predicting something. And finally, planning the launch like a pro. So for both like our mini apps like Farville and Better, which is an on-chain sports betting app, we try to build some momentum before the launch, creating some sort of like preview experiences that maybe you can see better here. So before launching the mini app, we built some simple use cases. So in the case of Farville, you could simply like tap and plan things. In the case of like Better, you could bet on an event. So giving you a preview of what you can do, giving you a reward if you kind of like predict like the event in the correct way, so that first of all, like you're using the app and you're trying, and we get feedback in the momentum that we built, but also whenever you pre-save the frame, you are actually adding it. You are enabling us to send you a notification, and so whenever the mini app is ready for launch, you can simply like notify people, hey, you like this? This is now live. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, yeah, I hope you'll build a viral mini app. If you have any ideas or things or questions about this, I'm happy to help you all the time, of course. Thank you.
All right, next we will have someone who I think is masterful at capturing the spiritual narrative of Farcaster. I think I consider him and then a group of other users on the network, including Six, Flood, Light, there's a few others who are perfect, or not, I wouldn't call them perfect, but craftsmen at articulating a lot of the thoughts and the essence of Farcaster into words that we then read. So, no further ado, I'd like to introduce Jihad.
What's up, what's up? We're just gonna jump right into it. What are we building towards? If you ask everyone in this room that question, you'll probably get a dozen really solid answers. And if you asked everyone in crypto that question, you'd probably get a bunch of really generic answers. Things like economic sovereignty, decentralized ownership, credibly neutral systems, whatever buzzword that they can come up with that day. And it's not that these things aren't true, but the goal of this talk is to convince you of three things. First, that we should all have the same answer to that question. What are we building towards? Second, that I think the answer to that question is actually very simple and very in line with Farcaster's ethos. And finally, that I think it has direct impacts on what your job is as a founder or builder. Before we get into that, though, let's zoom out. We're sort of at a time where there are two really important digital technologies that we're all interacting with every day: crypto and AI. More specifically, we could argue that it's open global financial rails and large language models. Now, if you're here, you probably think that these technologies are going to impact our lives in ways that we can only begin to imagine. But in my mind, there's one thing that's already true. The intersection of these technologies is leading to an acceleration of entrepreneurship, startup abundance. It has never been easier to build a product, reach customers, and sell to literally anybody in the world. Anyone can vibe code a mini app and deploy it to Farcaster, build a SaaS product on Replit. No code, no fees, no middlemen. So that's the answer to our first question. We are building towards global, unrestricted access to entrepreneurship. We're closing the gap between imagination and action. And mini apps are just the beginning. The shape of startups is going to completely change over the next few years. So whether you're building in DeFi or code gen or creator tooling, or you're building a new blockchain, that is the mission that is holding us together. That is our North Star. Which brings us to the second part of the conversation. Farcaster has always been a network that has supported builders. From the beginning, Farcaster was a network of builders and tinkerers and creators in crypto. And I think for that reason, Farcaster is uniquely positioned to be at the center of this entrepreneurial revolution, the social network for startup abundance, if you will. But as Farcaster grows, it's not going to look and feel the same anymore. we're going to need a bunch of overlapping networks, distinct networks, building on top of Farcaster that are going to push forward specific visions of the future in line with startup or entrepreneurial abundance. So what does that mean for you, the founders and builders in the room? Again, I think this has a very direct impact on your job. A founder's job is to articulate a specific point of view and then build the network that makes that thing a reality. Now, we could argue that network is a really general term. But I think there's three things that make up a network, regardless of whether or not they are visible or invisible, legible or illegible. Farcaster is a network, but as we'll discuss, so is Hire, so is Clanker, so is Base, so is Design Twitter, right? Networks are made up of three things: the people in the network, the tools, how those people are interacting with one another, and the context, the orientation of those people, their shared lore, their shared vibe, their shared energy and knowledge. You could argue in a way that we're building toward an era of hyperlocality, but it's not necessarily based off of specific geography or a zip code, and it's not necessarily based off of network states either. These networks are the things that are going to act as the foundation for the builders of the future. With the founders that I work with, I like to make the distinction between serving versus shaping a network. Every founder that is building a product that people are using is inevitably serving a network. You're listening to people, you're adding value. A really good example of this that we're all familiar with is the original token bot product. Farcaster wanted to play with tokens, and the Clanker team decided that they were going to launch an agent that made it possible to launch a token in feed. People got super excited, they responded to a need that the community had, and it was a big success. A non-crypto example that has to do with more listening to a community narrative is Bandcamp. During COVID, the music industry was, obviously not doing super well, and Bandcamp decided to listen to the narrative that its network was telling it and made fees completely free for a day, which increased revenue 14 times the normal Friday. On the other side of things, though, I believe great founders are going to shape a network, not just serve it. Today, I think Farcaster is doing a great job of this. Base is doing a great job of this by putting together a very specific vision of the future and then giving us tools like MiniKit that allowed us to build towards it really easily, regardless of whether or not we are developers. Clanker, obviously, we brought up TokenBot as an example, but now Clanker has become a network in and of itself. Clanker has its own protocol with clients built on top of it, with a very specific philosophy around what it means to launch a token and the importance of tokens in the ecosystem. And I think all of those things together, again, the people, the tools, and the lore, the context, are the things that make a network. And finally, I think organizations like Splits, who have built infrastructure from the beginning that have sort of defined what it means to be an on-chain product, and are now building specific interfaces on top of that that are defining what it means to be an on-chain startup. With all of these things, you could fork the technology, you might be able to copy the tech, but you're not going to be able to fork the network. So how do we go about building a network? How do we be like these great founders that are shaping the future? I think first and foremost, the playbook has to do with believing in something. You have to define what the future you're building towards is and define the philosophy that you're working with. Without belief, you could build a great product, but in this era, you're not going to be able to build a long-term sustainable business. All the great teams that we mentioned believe in something. But then there are specific tactics. And again, getting users in this world is pretty meaningless without getting really granular about what it means to bring those folks together and build trust between them. I think there are three things that could help you do that really well. First, words. You got to write a lot, whether it's an internal handbook or externally to align a community around your product. Writing is not only going to articulate your vision, it's also fodder for LLMs. You're able to accelerate your own progress by making it possible for you to use and leverage AI tools. Second, boost. I think the single highest leverage thing that you could do as a founder or a builder is to help your customers, help your community achieve their goals, regardless of whether or not it has anything to do with your product. You shouldn't have to depend on them using your SaaS product in order to help a customer achieve the vision that you guys are all working toward together. And finally, this is the more specific one, but cohorts. I think a lot of great founders have done a good job of launching hackathons, programs, accelerators, incubators on very small scales and using that as a sandbox to develop a network of their own. Get the right people together, build trust, figure out what it is that you could do to create value, and then push that community forward into the broader network to influence it. If you do all of these things well, it is pretty clear to me that you will win. But what does it mean to win? How do you measure success in this world? Again, your job is to articulate a specific vision of the future, and a specific future that people genuinely want to inhabit, and then build a network that makes it real. If we're all working toward global, unfettered access to entrepreneurship, then the success metric isn't daily active users or a specific growth metric, it's agency. You are helping people achieve the future that they want to achieve in line with the vision and the network that you're building. The world is moving faster than ever, and the best founders are not just going to build products, they're going to build networks. Your job is not just to capture attention, but to cultivate agency in every single person that your product and your business interacts with. Thank you.
Okay, before I introduce the next speaker, I have a question. Did anybody hack? Did anyone submit a project for the hackathon? Oh my God. Has anyone, who here has tried Coinoroid? Guys, Fred Wilson gave it a shout out. You have to try it. You can find it. Graham, did you post it? Can they find it on your profile? Okay, go to @McBain. Do not coin me though. I don't want to be coined right now, but try it after. The next speaker is, if you were a developer on Farcaster before Linda joined, this was actually your go-to person if you had any developer questions, despite not being on the Farcaster team. So I'd like to introduce somebody who I've grown to call a very close friend and someone I look up to a lot, Samuelhuber.
Welcome, everybody. Guess I'm actually in New York. There's a lot of me saying things about the US, and I'm actually in New York. It's fun. We're going to talk about 1 year of serving Farcaster companies and building on top of Farcaster. A quick rundown of what that actually means. Well, there's a lot of people in and around the Farcaster ecosystem, a lot of people with AI now coding, but to me there's generally indie hackers, bootstrapped, and also just companies making revenue. There's a few of those. A lot of it, to me at least, is bootstrappers and just people trying to figure it out. And that's also somewhat of what I've basically learned over the last year. Well, what do? It's like a long list, but TLDR is anyone going to market on Farcaster or needing tech support, that's usually us. And this is how it basically feels to build on Farcaster. This is a little meme. This is going to get bigger because I literally posted this into ChatGPT. And ChatGPT said it's both a joke and a cry for help, wrapped in a dramatic Star Wars aesthetic. If you're literally like spending some time and reading what's up there, this is just like 2/3 of all the terms that were thrown around last year that generally just mean, hey, you can develop on top of Farcaster, you can do cool shit, you can build community. That's the 3 things, and like the 4th now is with crypto, you can earn money. And like that's Farcaster wrapped into 1 sentence. We use a lot of words to try to describe that. So that's fine. It's fine. We'll figure it out, right? So the one thing that we all do is we're hanging in there because life is not a race, right? Like, even though we're in New York, everyone is hustling, like, it's fine. We'll all be fine. So generally, how does that translate to navigating Farcaster? And I've put a little bunch on the slides that you can read, but there's 2 things in Farcaster that you just kind of like have to do, and that's just talking to people. And the developer calls literally is like a great resource. There's also the recordings of those on YouTube if you want to get transcriptions and just read through quickly. Dylan is also doing a great job at stack.eth to do summaries every single time that he's in one. But it's a community and a platform that's moving fast, which if you're expecting something like, oh, I'm building on top of the internet that's been around for 25 years, you're at the frontier. So you'll spend some time just reading through all of that and making sure that you're literally up to date. So like attending the dev calls, reading the FAPs, and just generally being open-minded and contributing to the discussion. There's a lot of times something happening which I find quite interesting where Dan and Varun and the whole like Merkle team post their thoughts openly every single time, which is literally their thoughts that they have in their head right now. And people take that as, oh, this is the definite thing. Well, no, just like actually have a conversation, ask questions, because literally what's happening is we'll just figure it out together, right? Like, literally, the simple defaults is something that we've talked about and like discussed a bunch. So we're like, should we have a following feed? Should we just have the home feed? How should all of the app work and be set up? Well, you all have input. You all are probably in the 1% of hardcore users that are going to actually play with those settings. So just remember that a good default is the best to have. Part of my job is literally to talk to new developers every single day and just figure it out. The thing that they appreciate is something to get started right quickly, and then they have to adjust. But that initial default to just have a successful moment initially is really, really valuable. Like when you're starting into a new ecosystem, and most of you probably have been onboarded to Farcaster by, say, Dan, Varun, or like a Twitter DM, or somebody literally doing white glove service to you, most people come into the ecosystem, and they're like, oh, I just see great content, but I need to figure it out. And then going back to like the ChatGPT translation of all of the naming, like just chirper them a little bit. Literally go, have conversations, help them, and realize that for them, a good default and holding their hand is what you need to do. And also, like, serving Farcaster companies, that is what you have to do. When you're talking to people, just holding their hand and showing them the way is what has worked best for us to really make sure that people understand Farcaster, to see the value and go there. So I've posted a little bit about just like some questions people have had about what we're doing. And let's start at the bottom with counterintuitive learnings from the past year. You don't really need to read all of this. It's on the slides for back reference. But the TLDR is Farcaster is new. So what can you do with it? Well, everything, because it's full on open and programmable. But that also, like, everything usually means there's no good default. There's no playbook. So the thing we learned is just literally show and paint the picture and then walk it together with people. And some people will not see that journey, and that's fine. And we're focusing on the people who want to walk that journey. And the one thing that always comes up is what's the expected payoff? Literally, I have calls like 30 minutes, 60 minutes, where people fall in love with Farcaster. They become active on the platform, but then it's like, okay, so like, what does your company now do in Farcaster? Like, have you seen the leverage you can get? And they're like, well, how much money is it? What are we getting out? And Farcaster to me is a brand play or a play on building a community if you're in that sphere, if you're out for developers. If you want to make money on Farcaster, using the wallet is a really, really great way to do that. We built a mini app with Morpho that's now roughly around the hundreds of thousands in like total transaction volume in the like 3 months that it's out. And for Morpho, it's really cool because it's just like actual users, like humans, in the end, just small people using it instead of just institutions that they also have through their Coinbase integrations. But that's kind of like the thing there. And getting back to this, show, don't tell is even more important on Farcaster. Like communication, and that's at the top, is the tool we have. Always remember that Anakin meme where literally there's a lot of shit we have to communicate, so breaking it down, making it simple, showing people the way, just like if you watch The Mandalorian, like this is the way, and constantly repeating and reiterating that is really, really important. And also in there, like that this open protocol is there for you. You just have to spend some time on it because we're all developing it together. And that core understanding is something that I want to drive home today, is you can all contribute, and you should. And nobody should feel left out because they're just like, oh, should we ask this? Should we not ask this? But that also means everyone tries to figure it out, and we have to handhold each other as well. So come to Farcaster is still the one page that you all have basically agreed to, right? You're here. So you're already on Farcaster, but even businesses outside of Web3 want to go to Farcaster. And I'll tell you why. Because businesses outside of Web3 have a hard time monetizing audiences and targeting audiences. Last November in Hamburg, I gave a workshop for corporate developers. Corporate meaning like tens of thousands of employees, like billion-dollar revenues, just traditional businesses, how we would call them. They're sure like SAP of the world and those tech companies, but also German manufacturing companies. And those businesses would love to have the ability that we have in having all the open data and saying like, hey, I want somebody interested in a new dishwasher, and I could just search for that and target them. Facebook makes them pay to generally reach that audience. On Farcaster, all the data is open. It costs $10 a month on API providers to be like, hey, I can search this. I can directly reach out. I have notifications. It's also programmable. It goes into my backend, into my CRM. Well, it goes into my backend. My CRM is something where we need good defaults, and we're building those out for those companies to have a product they can use instead of having to build them themselves. And we'll get there, but this is part of where we currently are. So this is a list of things that I think are super undervalued in Farcaster. The general theme aligns with what the businesses not in crypto really like about Farcaster, and that's the open data, all the possibilities with the open data, and literally taking that together if you want to use AI, if you don't want to use AI, and building a great experience. Some of that is embed as an API provider, indexing our code's API, Nanar's API, direct messages, and literally using all the Farcaster tooling. There's a blog post, dtech.vision/farcaster/start, where we've just, like, it's on that little QR webpage as well, where we just broke all of that down. And that, to me, is the most interesting thing. And this is generally the pitch for me, is build a mini app, because you get to leverage all of that round trip in one thing. So if you like mini apps, if there's anywhere you think I can hold your hand, feel free to talk to me. I'm always one message away. And thank you so much for attending.
Okay, before I introduce the next speaker, can we just give a second to say that every community talk so far, their narrative violation is that men in crypto only wear flip-flops and gym shorts. They've all been dressed impeccably, so kudos to that. The next speaker was actually my gateway to Paragraph. He was OG Paragraph user. It's how I learned about the app. And he would do full-on deep dives around Farcaster ecosystem and then different emerging topics in crypto as well. And now it's really exciting to see him grow beyond Farcaster, really kind of capture some mind share on Twitter as well. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce YB.
Sweet. Oh, that was loud. Hey everyone, my name is YB, and I have been active on Farcaster since 2022. Currently, I'm working on my newsletter, Terminally On Chain, full-time. And today, I'm excited to give a brief intro on decentralized AI. This is a rabbit hole that I've personally been going down the last couple of months, and honestly, it's felt as exciting and addicting to me as I first got into crypto 5 years ago. So before we even get into the weeds of things, I think it's worth getting on the same page. When I first started researching this vertical, I thought the question that I was trying to ask was, which one wins between closed, open source, or decentralized AI? But it turns out that that's not even the right question to ask. See, if AI is as big of a shift, as a technology shift as internet was, then there's more than enough room for all three of these to coexist. In fact, back in the 90s, everyone thought that the next era of computing and internet would be built on the backs of Sun and Oracle. And then it turned out that there was more than enough room for things like Windows and open source competitors such as Linux and MySQL to also coexist. So if decentralized AI can even just capture 1% of the total market share and economic impact that AI is going to have in the next decade, then in my opinion, I think it's definitely worth paying attention to. With that being said, where does decentralized AI even fit in? So I'm going to split this talk up into two sections, the pre-training and post-training. Pre-training, whenever you hear about the massive NVIDIA clusters on the news, that's pre-training. It's building the brains of the model. And whenever you hear about people thinking ChatGPT is being sort of cringe or too agreeable, that's post-training, more so the personality or the expertise of the model. So with pre-training, there's three angles I want to approach this from. One, the philosophical side. Two, practical, and third, the more experimental. So going into the philosophy side of things, the question that I really want to address is open source AI as it stands today truly open source? And companies like Meta and DeepSeek and AI2 are all pushing open source AI quite a bit, and actually their contributions have been so helpful for the developer community to actually partake in all of these AI improvements that are happening. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that are sponsoring the massive GPU bill that comes in. And at any given point, the reality is that they can just decide to stop releasing their models as open source. And it might not even be because they don't want to. It could be that the US or the Chinese government say, hey, we don't want you doing this for geopolitical reasons, just as an example. So you're probably thinking, no big deal. I'll just use ChatGPT. That's what I've been doing anyways. And that might be OK for consumer use cases. But it turns out that enterprise AI actually cares. For them, cost at scale or even legal provisions on things like data and customizing their AI infrastructure is actually make or break for their business. And the reality is that there are a lot of teams and developers in Brazil and India and Australia that are actually very much dependent on these open source companies releasing their next generation of models and staying up to date. But they don't have any guarantee of that. So that's why it's important that we do have a decentralized state-of-the-art model, which isn't bound or dependent for money from any one company or isn't bound by any one legal jurisdiction. Cool. Moving on to practical. So what's actually happening right now in the space itself? I mentioned earlier that pre-training process actually requires a ton of capital expenses upfront for things like GPUs and the data centers. In fact, in the last 5 years since ChatGPT launch, the scaling laws have showed us that if you just keep on adding more and more GPUs and make the data centers bigger, then the models will get better, which is true. But even these centralized warehouses have their physical limitations. After a certain point, if the amount of operational expenses required to actually spend on these cooling equipment and the real estate and the labor cost that goes into all of this, it turns out that it's not justifiable to spend the money when the pre-training process efficiency is actually just going down. So that's why you have companies like Microsoft and Google and OpenAI all looking into distributed training as well. And the main question here is, can we train a state-of-the-art LLM over the internet? And it's by no means an easy problem. You actually have to reduce the network communication between GPUs by a couple orders of magnitude. But there are efforts being made. There's decentralized AI teams like Prime Intellect and Noose Research that are taking the pre-training process and breaking it down bit by bit and then optimizing different things that they can do. So it's very early into the research, but even in just this last year, it showed, the teams showed that there's actually a possibility to make this GPU communication less. And the most interesting part to me here was how collaborative the research process is with even teams from DeepMind and Meta AI. I think it proves that pretty much everyone in this space is thinking about distributed training in some form or fashion. And that's why you have Jack Clark, who's the co-founder of Anthropic, and even OpenAI's pre-training team, all acknowledging that the mother of all models is going to be built on some kind of decentralized network. Awesome. So going into the last part of pre-training, which is experimental, to me, this is the most crypto-esque of decentralized AI. We all know that Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Farcaster took the infrastructure layers of money, computing, and social and made them publicly available. And this actually allowed for a new canvas space of different kinds of product experimentation and financial use cases. So the question goes is, can we do the same thing for intelligence? And in order for that to happen, we need to make sure that there's a way that no one owns the entire model. Meaning I or you can't just upload the model to Hugging Face and call it a day. The weights need to be sharded across different nodes who participate in training this network. And it turns out that this is actually now possible. And there are a ton of teams in the decentralized AI space that are actually productizing this. So if this happens, then there's a totally new design space of development for different kinds of product building and financial experimentation that we can do with the next era of AI. Now, to wrap up pre-training, just 3 points I want all of you to take away. 1, open source AI isn't truly open source when there's a single company actually sponsoring the entire GPU bill. 2, sooner or later, everyone is going to need to care about distributed training as if you want to get the models bigger and better. And then 3, models as a true commodity actually opens up a whole new market space that we can think about. Sweet, let's go into post-training. So in a single sentence, post-training is basically taking different strategies like fine-tuning or reinforcement learning and making the models actually better at giving answers that are relevant and more niche. In the last 6 to 8 months, there's been a huge interest in post-training for all of these big tech companies because of the success that OpenAI had with its reasoning model. And then back in January, I'm sure all of you heard the news about DeepSeek V1 and how they trained a really good model at a fraction of the cost through post-training. So the thing about it is that we need data for post-training, and not just any kind of data, but really high-quality data from different kinds of experts in a wide variety of fields. And that's why OpenAI actually spends upwards of $300 million paying Mercer and Scale AI and Upwork to find and source all of these domain experts to fine-tune and make their models better. Now, the reality is that there's not many companies that have that kind of a budget to actually spend and get all these people working for them. And it sort of runs back the same story with social media, where do we just let 5 companies end up deciding what kind of information we're consuming on the daily basis for billions and billions of people? And it turns out that even the AI OGs and pioneers agree here. You have people like Andrej Karpathy and Jan LeCun talking about how it's essential that we do have some sort of collaborative and crowdsourced way to do post-training strategies for reinforcement learning and data labeling, creating evals, things like that. Now, the issue is that this is a non-trivial problem. It actually requires solving things like coordination, bad actors, privacy, all sorts of things. But fortunately for us, everyone in this room knows that there is precedence here. When you start thinking about the technologies that we're all working with, wallets, blockchain, stablecoins, micropayments, zero-knowledge, slashing mechanisms, then Karpathy's vision all of a sudden starts to make a lot more sense. You can think of it sort of like a decentralized schools approach, where you're trying to get wisdom and knowledge from people on all corners of the world and incentivizing them to actually share their very niche expertise in different parts of what they're good at. And you can think about it sort of like a society of minds approach or like a swarm approach instead of just having 5 giant monolithic models. How do you get everyone from all parts of the world sharing their experience to make AI better? And the truth is that the last 30 years of open source have showed us that people do in fact want to contribute. If you give them the right incentives and tooling to do so, they will come and actually shape this next era of technology that we're trying to go for. So to wrap up this talk, I just want to say I barely scratched the surface of what's going on in decentralized AI today. The ecosystem is growing so fast, it's genuinely hard to keep up. And if there's anything that I think I want all of you to take away, is that I believe that we're just a couple of months away from a lot of mindshare coming from both the AI side and the crypto side into this vertical. So if there was any component of this talk that was interesting to you today, I highly recommend just start going down the decentralized AI rabbit hole. It's intellectually so interesting, and I really do think that it's only a matter of time before everyone realizes that decentralized AI is here to stay. Thank you.
Whoa, okay. One last talk with a person who I think is a legend, who's like an icon on Farcaster. I think I met him at one of the first meetups in Venice, actually hosted by Alok from Standard Crypto, when nobody on the network yet knew that I was a woman. And so I showed up and everyone was like, wait, what? You're Ted? And then I ended up seeing him around Venice. We actually met up at a Brian Johnson meetup once, the Don't Die guy, and now he's up in the Bay Area. But you know him from many things. You know him from Bright Moments, you know him from the Books channel, and more recently, you know him from AMPS. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to our final speaker, Phil.
Thank you, Ted. Great, thank you. So today the title of my talk is The Farcaster Flywheel. A little bit about me before we get started. The theme of my career is helping on-chain creators make a living. And I've done this across a couple domains. Bright Moments, where we started IRL on-chain galleries all over the world. Recent work with AMPS, which has helped people monetize their audience during engagement market. And most recently Node, which is a non-for-profit that just announced a $25 million founding grant to help disrupt the art industry and create a generational institution for what we're building here. Sort of categorically, I think if you're here in this room, you're an optimist. And I think it's really important to be an optimist. I think the 37 user meme is amazing because if you're like me and you believe that Farcaster is going to be massively influential over the next decade, what an opportunity to be involved when there's only 37 users. But I think the optimism is really important to have some grounding in reality. And to me, I see Farcaster as a leverage bet on several trends. First, and the most important trend, is crypto. And I think this is something that's been going on for nearly 15 years at this point. And it's really important that the principles of crypto continue to be paramount. And I think that it's really easy as we sort of focus on building apps to lose those, but this idea of cypherpunk, this idea of decentralization, this idea of self-sovereignty and owning your own money, to me is the foundational layer of what we're doing here. Next, Ethereum is an incredible technology. It's this global computer we all know and love. And most recently, I think, the ability for Base to step in and really power low-cost transactions, and now there's other L2s catching up, is a huge tailwind. And so if all of these play out, I think it's going to be massively successful. If even a few of them just play out, I think we have a really good chance of changing the world. And so, as these trends sort of converge, there's two variables, and they're actually independent, and most people think about them as related. And so you have control as a founder over one of them, which is your burn rate. The second variable, which is independent, is the growth and the speed of the growth of the Farcaster network. And so as someone who's considering how to build a company or a product or a business on top of the network, you need to think very carefully about your strategy. Because if you have a high burn rate that's only going to work when the network has reached sufficient scale, you need to make sure that your runway times very well with that. And so you need to understand what game you're playing. And so, as a recovered management consultant, I can't help but showing a 2x2 matrix here. If you believe that the network is going to grow very, very fast and you have a thesis for that, it may make sense to put all your chips on the table, go all in, try to capture that very quickly with a large team. However, if you think that the network is going to grow more slowly, it makes sense to extend your runway as long as possible. And so understanding what game you're playing is really important sort of for being successful on top of Farcaster. So sort of with that strategic outline here, I want to talk a little bit about tactics. And I think there's 3 tactics that are really very valuable. And I won't go into sort of the granular level that Limone did with apps, which I think he did a fantastic job, but these are more sort of operational ideas you can take as you're thinking about how to build a business. So the first is, the Merkle team is excellent at communicating their priorities. And people sometimes mistake these priorities as ways for them to make product decisions. And that's actually not the right framing. The right way to think about it is the Merkle priorities, you should be drafting behind them to inform your go-to-market strategy. Those priorities are going to change over time. And so your go-to-market strategy should draft on top of Merkle. We've all seen it. When there's a Merkle priority, like USDC rewards, it creates a massive influx into the ecosystem that can spur engagement with mini apps. But if you're building your product on top of somebody else's priority, you're always going to be a step behind. And so I think go-to-market is an area where it can sit on top of your product layer. It moves a little bit more quickly, but fundamentally, if Merkle decides to go a different direction, you're not stranded, and you can sort of pivot to make sure that you have a new way to distribute your product to users. Importantly, if you're building on top of this network, you need to be solving a daily problem for people. There are some businesses where people don't need to come back every single day, but often the businesses that are the largest and the most successful solve something called the toothbrush test, which is something where you're willing to open the app and use it every single day. And as someone who's building on top of a social network, as someone who's building inside of an app, this distribution is really important. The reason you build on top of Farcaster is because you have this sort of in-feed rich interaction. And your app should be something that people are willing to open, that you can use notifications, drive behaviors. And I really encourage you, if you're trying to build something, simplify it down to its most basic level. If you're thinking about this incredibly complex sort of Rube Goldberg device that has layers of tokenomics, say, what could I ship today? How can I strip that down? And how can this be something that delivers value to my users every single day? And then finally, I think that building on top of Farcaster, and especially if you're someone who's recently experimented with mini apps, is incredibly helpful, but you need to have a plan to graduate. At some point, if your business is going to be wildly successful, you're going to hit an asymptote. And that's even in the case where Farcaster grows very quickly. And so you should have an idea of what that asymptote looks like, and you should have internal signals that you're looking at to saying, hey, how big do I think this can get as a function of the network size, and are we close yet? And that's going to inform your strategy. If you start to approach one of those asymptotes, you know that you can sort of jump to that next pond. And it's really important to time that. This is an art, not a science. But as you're thinking about these ponds, you need to realize that the product you're building today may need to evolve over time to be able to fit some of these adjacent ponds. I'll just say sort of one point on this because it's salient. The World team had some really interesting announcements this week. And as I sort of step back and I look at the trend and sort of what's interesting as a mini app builder, there are several at-scale platforms, Farcaster being the most nascent, there's World, there's Telegram, who are supporting this sort of mini app forward strategy. And as a developer, this is really exciting. I love the idea of being able to build a web app that I can get distribution through Farcaster, jump to an adjacent network that has overlaps. World is built on top of another Ethereum L2. And then eventually the goal, and this is something that Dan articulated this morning, is to be able to retain those users on a long-term basis. We're building on top of the web. That's really important to remember. So Farcaster is a great way to go to market, but ultimately you want to be able to capture those users and have a direct relationship with your audience. And so finally, just to point to builders, as people who are excited about crypto, we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. Great products solve a problem for people, and if it's really good, they'll be willing to share it through word of mouth. So it's just helpful to sometimes step back to realize that and understand that Farcaster is quite possibly the best place in the world right now, one of the most underrated places in the world to get distribution. But at the end of the day, you need to solve a real problem for people, and it needs to be so good that they're willing to tell their friends about it. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
We good? All right, thank you. All right, when Adrian's ready, we'll go. You ready?
GM Farcaster.
GM Farcaster. We're back, and we just finished up with the community talks, and so we have a couple of the community talk folks up here with us, Phil and Limone or Limone?
Limone.
Limone. Italiano. Limone. I've been calling you Limone the whole time. So I want to start with, there's a couple things I pulled from your talk, but Limone, why don't you mention the last slide? How did you end the talk?
Can I say that?
Yes, absolutely.
I mentioned get the fuck out of localhost, and I think it's kind of also aligned with some of your slide, Phil.
Yes.
When keeping things simple and just shipping them out in the wild and get feedbacks from the users and see what's happened, and then you iterate on that. I think that's one of the best thing you can do to grow your idea or product, and mini apps help you a lot with distribution, So that's why I think, you just need to get out of localhost, get the fuck out of localhost.
Get in your head. Yeah, get out of your head.
And see what happens. It's fun.
I think that's, that sort of philosophy is something I see you doing all the time, Phil, is getting it out in front of people. So what's your advice around that as well?
Yeah, I think that the team has done a really great job of creating something that's simple to launch on day one. And often the idea is not the hard part, it's all of the stuff that comes with it. And people try to overcomplicate. And should we incorporate a company? And do we need to make a website first? And even now, if you go to amps.fun in the web browser, it's just there's not a marketing website.
Yeah.
And often I've been surprised on Farcaster by how often the people will step up to help you. I've had people offer to make the marketing website for me, which I don't think would happen in any other place on earth.
That's a great point.
People are like, hey, I can see you suck at this. Do you want me to do it for you? So it's kind of nice. Yeah.
We've experienced similar things.
Has no one looked at the GM Farcaster website, and why are they not offering to build one for me? What?
I think they have a time. I think they've looked at it and gone, ooh, they need help. And we're like, well, no, Erica, out the gate said that to us. Yeah, so we just haven't taken her up on it yet. And then she got busy. One of the other things that came from yours, Phil, you said, being early without the ability of being patient is the same as being wrong was on your slide. And you didn't really talk about that, but it jumped out at me. And I think that is part of what we see happening a lot. And I think it kind of tied into even Fred Wilson's talk when he was talking about SoundCloud. And, basically they just needed to hang in there a little longer and do something a little different.
Yeah.
Can you just iterate on that? What was that thinking?
I mean, I know a ton of people who have built products on top of Farcaster, and they've been doing it for a few years. Yeah. And there's a moment where the network growth is sort of very spiky, and it accelerates and gets really exciting, but then it sort of reverts to the mean. And if you're scaling up and you have a 10, 15, 20-person team, and the network growth, sort of that curve that I showed, isn't following the trend that you expect, you don't have the ability to be patient, and you're not in a financial situation where you can sort of afford to wait. Now, it's different from being an investor where you sort of can make your bet, and as long as you don't need the liquidity, you can just sit on it, right? As a proud DGen holder, I'm willing to be patient, right?
Yeah.
But as a builder, you have to think about runway, you have to think about operational costs, and so I just think this goes back to make sure that you're sort of aligning your company building journey with the network growth journey if Farcaster is your primary go-to-market mechanism?
I think that was just really good advice for us. Like, ourselves are feeling that as well. And I, okay, so I'm a active user of Farville, which I was just like, as I was sitting there, I'm like, I gotta harvest my crops. I'm really behind. I've already blown my streak.
We made you addicted.
Yeah, I know, totally. So, speaking to that, like launching something like a game on Farcaster in that ecosystem versus somewhere else, what would you advise if someone's out there they want to build a mini app, they want to build a game, why should they come to Farcaster to do that? Like, what have you seen? What has been beneficial to you?
I think I still need to discover that, like most of that, of course. Most of me starting to build it was just to experiment and have fun. I've never built a game before, and it's like totally different from building products that I've been building in the past. So
right.
I'm learning a lot through that. But I guess the most exciting thing that I'm looking for, even for Farville, talking about scaling a mini app to something more, is around how, having this game that now it's pretty well, played, how we can use traditional, let's say, microtransactions that we are used to use and play with other games inside a platform that has a wallet and that should facilitate that. And so I think that's the biggest opportunity, that somehow there's a playbook that has been used on Facebook, for example, like Farmville, but other famous games. And I think that there are ways in which we can try to learn from that and reproduce it inside Farcaster with some perks and the ease of having a funded wallet and just making use of it to play the game and buy something around it. I think that's the best of
So that's like the next step, is figuring out how do you monetize this? How do you make it sustainable? We talk about monetize, but what monetize really means is how do you make this sustainable so you can keep it going?
For us, it's crucial. Of course, it depends on from game to game, from developer to developer, but we decided to not launch a token, and so we need to figure out the old way, probably. But still, I know that we have an opportunity, and I'm sure that there's opportunity for a ton more other games. So I will look into it if I was to start again. Maybe even before starting building Farville, before starting building any game, actually already trying to plan what type of microtransactions would make sense to integrate, if you're not planning to launch a token, of course.
Amazing. And then AMPS has been taking off like crazy. You've built multiple apps and things on Farcaster. What's your advice to somebody brand new? They have an idea. Where do they start, and how do they find those first few users just to jump in?
Yeah, I think the work on any product starts way before you write the first line of code. And I've been building a community on top of Farcaster for many years now. And so when the idea for AMPS came about, it felt like the continuation of a conversation. And I think that, as you think about a network, there's contributions that you can make to it, and then there's ways where you can receive value back from the community. And it's like a bank account. If you're not continually making deposits and you try to withdraw, it's going to be overdrawn. And so for anyone who's thinking about building a product, but maybe they don't have the idea yet, the best thing you can do is go out there and be helpful. What I've been doing this entire week at FarCon is sitting down with people who are building apps and saying, let me open the app in front of you and show you what it looks like for me.
Ooh, it's a good idea.
And that's an incredibly useful, whenever people do that for me, I learn 10 things. It totally changes the roadmap for me. I did it with Jacob yesterday. I showed Kartik the wallet today. Anyone who wants to ask me, I'll sit down. I'd love to go through Farville with you. I'll show you my farm.
I was about to ask you.
It's very sad. I have very few crops, and I'm sure just the conversation with you, hopefully I'll give you ideas. You'll explain to me why it's so exciting. I get so energized from those conversations, and I recommend that it's a great way to start.
That is such a gift to users. And it's funny because we just did that with Chintan, who was here from Base, with Coinbase Wallet. I literally was going in to do something, and I'm like, oh, this isn't working. He's like, oh, I gotta go fix that. So it was literally live feedback while we were filming.
I was talking to Manon from Nanar and giving him feedback about using the Nanar kit, Farcaster kit. And he was like, just maybe, and I don't know if it was him or Rish actually who asked, but he's like, would you mind just recording your screen? If you record your screen when you're going through it. But that's what, like, the FarCon's so good, just to be in person with people, because you can get, like, you can record things and we can do things remote, but just like all the quick intermingling of users and builders and founders, like to like have that quick feedback is so valuable this week.
Absolutely. There's a piece of software called Loom, L-O-O-M.
Yeah.
It's a screen recording device. It's very popular in Silicon Valley and product circles. Install it, download it, use people's apps and send them a recording unsolicited. You will make a ton of friends, and then when the time comes for you to ask for feedback, it's great. It's a give and take. Varun did that for us for amps like a week and a half ago.
Wow.
And on one hand, I wanted to pull my hair out because there was all these things. I was like, no, it's not working. And it quite literally changed the direction of the product. And for a week, we spent time fixing all the bugs, and now it's better because of it. And so it took 2 minutes out of his day, and it totally changed our week. So
that's huge. Adrian, any last questions before we let them go get some lunch?
No, let them eat.
All right,
let's go.
Thank you. GM Farcaster.
All right. Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you.
All right, so GM Farcaster are back. We're with Jihad and Tayyab, who both did amazing community talks today. You guys had more of to me, it was more of the thinking ones, if you will. It was a little less practical of not the hands-on, let's, here's how you build kind of things, and more thought-provoking, I guess would be the way I would describe it. So you really kind of drove into DACC. Can you just give a quick, what is DACC?
Cool. So there was a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago even, who knows about time anymore. But there was a manifesto by Mark Andreessen called the Techno Optimist Manifesto. Yeah. And there was this whole thing going around about acceleration. And then Vitalik came out with this post called his version of optimism. And he talks about this idea of DIAC. And so I come from Pakistan. And so I have seen what the world looks like when you don't have democracy. We have democracy in name, but really we don't.
Right.
And so the most important thing for me is how do we get that? It's actually the reason I'm in crypto is how do we give access to people of a global financial and legal system? And that's why I got into crypto, and I read that, and it changed my perspective on acceleration, and acceleration kind of the thing that him and I always talk about this, which is
okay,
so
I did pair this well then.
Yes.
Okay, good.
You want to accelerate, but you want to be very aware of which direction you're accelerating and the consequences of where you're going. You really do need to know the world that you're trying to build.
And yours was a little bit more push forward, accelerate, but really thought-provoking in terms of where we're going, what's going on. So want to do a quick highlight overview for those?
Yeah. Well, I think to Tayyab's point, there's two axes of acceleration that are sort of referenced in my talk. There's this idea of entrepreneurial acceleration, which there's more companies are going to get started, more projects will be built. And then there's this idea of you need to orient yourselves in a specific way so that you can determine what you're accelerating towards. And I think that aligns very well with what Tayyab is saying, where it's we can't just all be accelerating aimlessly. We have to have an idea of where we are going. And I think ultimately my argument is that the founder's job is to help its users accelerate toward the same common goal. So if we are all building toward this idea of entrepreneurial abundance, a global on-chain economy, then it is up to the individual founders who are building the products that we are using to orient their users toward that same mission and build tools that allow those users to achieve that goal themselves. So yeah, I said at the end of the talk, I think the KPI there is if your users are becoming founders, that's a good thing. And in an era of entrepreneurial acceleration, then we want as many people to be building products and projects and whatever it might be as possible.
And I think that's where Farcaster ties in so well to everything that you just talked about. Was that your users are becoming founders over and over and over again in all different areas, which is really fascinating and kind of special in terms of the ecosystem. So tying the ecosystem to both of yours, how would you tie in yours is a little more direct, how you tied in Farcaster in terms of that aspect. When you're thinking about DIAC, where does that kind of, I know DIAC, right? Where does that kind of flow into the Farcaster ecosystem?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of history, and so throughout the world, there were many times where you used to work a land, but basically you were just a laborer and you worked for somebody.
I still do. It's just called Farville now.
Yeah.
We just had limone up here, so.
And you would work the land, and then somebody else would reap the benefits, right? And then we finally got away from serfdom at some point, where people were able to own private property, and they were able to dedicate their resources, their risk, and their capital into something, and that's how we got such a large economy. And so we've been in a world where these Web 2 platforms have basically owned us, and we're basically doing work on their behalf every single day. I think Farcaster is an example of like releasing us from the shackles of like digital serfdom. And,
I love that.
And that's kind of like why, I mean, that's why one of the biggest reasons why I've been on Farcaster for so long and been trying to push it.
By the way, nice flex at the very beginning of the talk. Flex. I'm FID 66. Thank you. I was like, oh, all right, I see. Okay, I see you.
I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I do think I did play a big part in the earliest days. I hosted a lot of the meetups that we did in New York, and it's because I believed in kind of like the same things that many of us do now, and I knew that I needed to get it out to as many people, and it like this community wasn't going to grow if we didn't put that early work in. So,
and that's why we have such a strong, large community of Farcaster in New York.
Yeah,
that's part 100%. Of what you guys did. So yeah, amazing. Adrienne, what questions from you? She's like, I'm just chilling over here.
No questions.
Any other questions before we let them eat?
I think we should let people eat. What were we going to say?
No, go ahead. I had one last
what else are you guys looking forward to today?
That was what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Lunch.
So you did.
Lunch for sure. And like, I'll be honest, like I was not nervous since I found out that I had to give a talk. And then like an hour before, my nerves just popped just like straight, just haywire. And I feel like I'm coming down from that nerve ride.
The adrenaline's coming down.
So I'm like ready to like go outside, get some sun, get some food,
talk to some people,
relax,
chill.
No longer have to worry about giving a talk. And I'm excited for the rest of the weekend. I know we're like doing talks today, we're Builders Day yesterday, but I'm excited to just hang out tomorrow with everyone at brunch, at paddleball, at all of the things. So I'm just basically excited.
We've been working I've been working nonstop.
Yeah.
She's been hacking.
Yeah.
But I've been working nonstop, so I'm feeling that same thing. I'm like, I can't wait for tomorrow.
Yeah. Just want to hang out with my
can't wait
friends.
for brunch.
Yeah.
How about for you? Yeah.
Lunch first and foremost, and then after that, same. I feel like, this morning I was chit-chatting with people, but I was getting pulled one direction, doing one thing.
Yeah.
So second half of the day will just be hanging with the internet friends, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, go have some
talk.
lunch, and we're going to get our last two up here. Thank you.
This is a sweet setup.
Wait, is this mic on?
By the
Yes,
way,
it's on.
I like the hair.
Oh, thank
Is
you.
it new? Longer?
I just stopped combing and people liked it more, and I liked it more.
Just stop combing
It's actually made my life a lot easier.
Amazing.
You know that Mark Zuckerberg also gets away with doing it, so you can too.
That's not the same
Do you have a
comparison.
chain?
Yeah, I've always had this stuff.
Yeah, you're sporting your Zuck look.
It's your Zuck look.
Curly hair.
Zuck copied me on that one.
That's so funny. All right, and we're back with Samuel Huber and YB. So you guys both had amazing talks. Yours is very different. You were more about decentralized AI, which was interesting. So that's like a new thing you've been exploring. But one of the things I noticed what you said right up front is like you're doing terminally on chain now full time.
Yeah.
Like how exciting is that?
It's amazing. This is now year 3, so
Oh,
still
wow.
going at it.
Crazy.
And I feel like both of you know this better than anyone, but it's tough being a content creator and making it work. So yeah, figuring that out.
But you're doing it amazing.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
doing it.
I
You're doing
appreciate
it.
it, yeah.
So why did you decide suddenly to focus on that for here, like for your talk today, rather than all the other things that I know you're exploring all the time?
I think the last 6 or so months, like slowly, I got more and more interested into decentralized AI. I think I mentioned it at the beginning of the talk, but I feel like I went through the same kind of excitement with the rabbit hole when I first got into crypto.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it was a good excuse for me to learn like new technical stuff in AI. And then I feel like the subtle part that people miss is that when you go through crypto, you learn a lot of different things, and you can map that to what the AI community is talking about, like who is this kind of builder, or what kind of product is memed in this way. And there's a lot of parallels that it's just interesting going through both together. So
cool.
Who's their Burrow Dutch?
Oh,
who's here, Boro?
I'm Boro Dutch. What do you mean? We're all Boro Dutch.
We're all Boro Dutch. We're all Warpcast admins.
YB, you could see, I can see, like, you, the reason you chose that talk is because it was like you were interested in it.
Yeah.
Like, it was.
Definitely.
And you're such a natural teacher.
Thank you.
So it's super cool that you take us along on the journey.
Yeah, I think it's like, I was, when I first got into the topic, it felt sort of memey because you just added the word decentralized in front of fill in the blank. But then when you start going through it, you're like, okay, like, sure, as with anything, like 90% of the concepts probably aren't going to work out, but that's okay. The 10% is really interesting and worth paying attention to.
Yeah.
So.
I love it.
How do you actually figure out those 10%? Because for me, one thing I have to bias against is when I hear something overhyped, and decentralized AI is part of it, AI especially, is I count it off as that's just all the people hyping, but you need to take 2 layers out and then look deep. How do you do that and get to the 10%?
Specifically with this, one was like, have they actually shipped a product and like, can I use it? And 2, what are the perspectives of the AI community on these projects too? Because then you get like a pulse check of like, is this even like a real thing or not? So
How do you do that on the conceptual side? Because people like, especially with Twitter and content creation, say the same concept over and over, like mobile context protocol for, model context protocol, for example. It's like, oh, this really big thing, you can have AI agents interact with your shit and everyone's doing it, and you're kind of like, okay, is this real or overhyped? And then you have to look one way deeper to come up.
I mean, it's your own like vibe check at the end of the day, right? Like, do you think Farcaster is going to grow or not? And then some people in crypto might say no, and some might be like over the moon and be here, right? So I think it's just how you sort of break down the papers.
What I'm hearing is your TLDR is just don't discount it, spend a lot of time.
Yeah,
but that kind of is a hard sell in like as a general rule. I was trying to hope that because you break down so much so often, you just have a general rule. It seems like you just have.
No, I think there's really nothing other than just going through all of the papers and trying out the products. To be honest,
This is so. I'm like, we can just Samuel. Why aren't you doing your own podcast? Is what I'm trying to figure out right now.
3v1 now.
I'm like sitting here going, why isn't he doing a podcast? Great questions, and I loved your talk. And I feel like you've been the go-to sort of. Ted started off by saying that, like before they had Linda, you were Linda, helping people build, people build on Farcaster.
I love Linda. Like we're doing workshops together. She's like now doing the mini app series every Friday.
I know, which is fantastic, and I'm so glad to see that. So, what is your advice? Somebody's coming in, they want to build something, they want to, or maybe they're not even on Farcaster and they're building. What are you advising them in terms of like getting their first users and how to go about the process?
Okay, you kind of did a 2-part question
I know,
without
I totally
realizing it. The second part is they want to get users. The first part is they're not on Farcaster. Or just they're maybe building something.
Yeah.
If they're building something, they need to figure out, are they building something for themselves? And then all of what we talk about in distribution of it doesn't actually matter at all, though it's a hard psychological switch. It's like, I'm just building this for myself. Doesn't feel like anyone on Twitter talking venture back, like at scale, millions of users, I'm chasing them.
Right.
No, it's like self-fulfillment is okay. And not comparing to that venture-backed dream that you're sold. And like, if you then think about, okay, I'm not in that part, I actually want to build something that people want to use. It's like, are you at that stage where you want to have something to go to market? We see like ship fast a lot. Mini apps really help there.
Yeah.
But then if you're not on Farcaster, you need to get into that and understand it's, well, you've kind of like built a web page probably as like your first thing. Just wrap that. Technically, my joke nowadays is we have docs for that because I'm writing a lot of docs, but it's literally like, even if you don't know anything, it took me 30 minutes to go into a code base I had no idea on in a framework I had no idea of and make it a mini app. So it's just the awareness of that. And where do you get that awareness? It's, well, we have docs for that, literally. But just like Yash said, it's like, Google it, research it, and that's what we have to do a better job. And it's in the Farcaster community, with all of the changes we have, to at least in that communication have some stability of where people can go. And I'm hoping that we're part of that with the content we put out. And otherwise, it's actually just going up to people. There's a reason I don't have a pay-gated Calendly, because people just need a conversation.
Yeah, I think you're right on there. And I think the more, we're seeing so much more of that now, like you said, every Friday, mini apps. And I think that's going to help so much to stabilize and get people on there who want to build something. And you made a really great point, though, too. I just want to double click on really quick. The building for yourself versus trying to build the thing that you can get somebody to give you millions of dollars for at a VC. Sometimes if you're building it for yourself, that might follow later on because it's probably going to be a better experience.
Interestingly speaking,
what do you think?
If you go to people who have done the uber successful thing, they solve their own problem.
Yeah.
But that boils down to psychology of being obsessed with the problem. It's like, I'm in Zurich in like a co-working space near the ETH Zurich University. It's like one of the most technical places to be in the world. And there's a lot of technical people. And sometimes it comes up that they have great technology, but no sense about who the actual end user is. If those people solve their own problem, that's really interesting because they know that user, then they have a problem of going to market.
Right.
But if you're solving your own problem and then you figure out, oh, other people just ask you about it, that's kind of an inkling of maybe you have some first product market fit type of thing. Whereas if you're just trying to build venture scale, it's a totally different game and you're chasing the idea maze until something sticks. Well, it's way more chill to solve your own problem or have that one thing. And if you raise venture, you realize you're building $1 billion company or you're a failure. And like that realization is what a lot of people don't have when they are like, oh, I'm going to build my idea and I've been asked to invest in this. Like, do you want to play that game? For a lot of people, it's a great game to play. For other people, it's probably not. And if you're going back to the psychology, if you're obsessed with a problem, if it's your own problem, it's easy to be obsessed about. But other people are obsessed with other people's problems. So it's just boiling down to that, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Adrian, questions for our guests?
Well, just Samuel, I mean, it relates to the 1,000 true fans from like a content perspective, but if you're building, right, and you're building your problem, you go niche, the internet gives you access to the world. So like, do you have, can you get your first 1,000 customers on Farcaster? Probably. It's shocking.
Oh,
like,
You'd be surprised. Like, I was talking to somebody building a mini app. I don't want to leak their finances, but
why? We're not recording.
That's why I'm not naming names. But they just added a mint button in one of the many mini apps we have, and they made like $3,000 within a day. Just because that community.
I might need a consultation from you on this.
They just added a mint button into a community and into a tool that people are already using, and we're just able to monetize that.
Yeah.
The question then becomes: is that a one-off, or can you do that? And like Phil hit a great point in his talk with the toothbrush test. And I would say for monetization, is it something that is valuable every week, like your newsletter, or monthly works as well, but then it has to be high value, where if it becomes a habit, I'm just microtransacting in a mini app.
A lot of that is like capturing attention, which is a one-time thing.
Notifications in mini apps is not a one-time thing.
Okay, fine, but
targeting based on like literally knowing the contents people post on Farcaster, heavily underutilized, is not a one-time thing. But the attention to do that and drive that every single day and do that sale is harsh. Yeah.
Right.
But
I was just saying, but it's also just on Farcaster, it's so easy to make, like, because everyone has a wallet.
To make that, yes, to get the distribution, you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people coming to DTech to like work with us is like either technical problem or most of the time distribution. And we now have people coming to us just because I have distribution.
Right.
And they just want the reposts and working with us because they've been referred or something. But the 0 to 1.
By the way, we can, we can help with distribution.
Yeah, Samuel, we'll talk.
We are distribution.
I'm still due to the GM Farcaster mini app. The problem I have is when people...
We don't have a mini app yet. We're getting there.
That's, you know what it is? I asked you to work on a project that's not your problem.
That's one. The other one is you didn't put a deadline on me. I'm a Japanese just in time.
He wasn't obsessed enough.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why you're not obsessed with making a GM Farcaster mini app. I actually do need it now.
Okay, that's
it's urgent.
I have a flight back. That's 7.5 hours.
It's
Oh my God, you're leaving tonight. Oh wow.
I actually have I looked into the YouTube API because we were talking about it, and I figured out that you can get a webhook from YouTube apparently on live streams. Not sure exactly, but latest videos. I've now actually written a little script that gives me all the latest videos from a channel. So I have some of the pieces.
I think
actually,
Robin was doing some work on this too, right?
It's also funny, like I'm starting to learn front-end development. Like you know how big UX is and like trying all of the different tools. I'm now getting into just writing my first like front-end because I've always been in the fortunate position to have other people that we collab with write front-ends or being able to pay for it. And like things like the GM Farcaster mini app is why I need it, because then in 1 hour I can do the front-end and then the back-end is natural to me. So there.
Wow. All right, well, let's let these men go eat.
build our apps.
You guys have been amazing. Yeah, go build our apps too.
Inside there are 2 wolves in you.
Yeah, 2 wolves and one's
Are
hungry.
you doing the
One's hungry and one
you're
wants
doing
to build
concept,
stuff.
monetization, and strategy, and I'm just the dumbass building it, yeah?
Not dumbass, but yeah.
Minus the dumbass part.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you.
Thanks for having
Your
us on.
talks were amazing, and we'll have them all on GM Farcaster coming up hopefully next week. We're going to be packaging them all up, and
Thank you.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Rob.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, guys.